Ever wonder how real change happens? Ubuntu Narratives podcast uncovers the extraordinary stories of ordinary Africans building a more just and equal world. In each episode, we sit down with a change maker who reveals the triumphs, challenges, and practical steps that you can take to make a difference in your own community. Tune in and find the inspiration to act. Welcome to Season 2 of the Ubuntu Narratives podcast. In this series, we explore the realities, challenges, and possibilities of gender equality in African workplaces. Tune in and find your inspiration to act. Hello to our viewers watching us on YouTube, and hello to our listeners listening to us across our podcast platforms. In this first episode of our new series, we are going to focus on the landscape of gender equality in the workplace in Uganda and Africa. And I'm very happy to be joined by Rita Achiro, who is the Executive Director of Uganda Women's Network. Uganda Women's Network is a women's rights advocacy organization that exists to coordinate collective action among women on gender equality. And just a bit about Rita. She has a very long and illustrious profile, and I hope we do her justice. Rita has extensively worked with and on women in leadership, including elective politics and decision-making. She's worked on women's land rights, women in peace building, civic and voter education, gender-based violence, and access to justice. Over the last 27 years, Rita has been deeply invested in women's rights work, working closely with different stakeholders, including government, development partners, non-government organizations, religious institutions, cultural leaders, young people, and other groups of people. She has enjoyed excellent working relations with governments, including Parliament, where she has contributed to advancing gender-responsive laws, especially in Uganda. These laws include the Domestic Violence Act of 2010, the Trafficking in Persons Act, the FGM Act, the Land Amendment Act, and the Land Policy. And while her work is at national level, she has also done a lot of engagements at local government level. Through her leadership, she has reached over 100 local government districts, working with local governments and councils to build their capacity. And she has done this for over 100 leaders, both men and women, in the different districts. She has also built the leadership capacity of women at grassroots level in over 80 districts, including helping them to form groups, supporting them to, advocate for their rights at local and grassroots level. And she currently is the consultancy team lead for a World Bank project through the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development on the Generating Growth Opportunities and Productivity for Women project, the GROW project. Specifically, her work on this project is looking at aspects of negative social norms that hinder women's entrepreneurship. Really an illustrious profile. I think finally what we need to know about Rita is that she has also worked at international level, where she has represented Uganda on official government delegation, on the UN Commission on the Status of Women, as well as the Convention on Elimination on All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, which is CEDAW in short. And she is currently the chairperson of the African Women's Leadership Network, Uganda chapter, a body of the African Union. So Rita, fantastic resume. And we're so excited to have you here as our guest on our very first episode, looking at gender equality, the landscape of gender equality in the workplace in Uganda and Africa. You're welcome, Rita.
Thank you very much, Christine. I'm glad to be here.
And maybe just to start, I wanted to give you an opportunity to tell us, a bit about yourself. Yes, we've had what you do as a career, but it would be good to hear who is Rita outside of work, but also what inspired you to get into this work around gender equality.
Who is Rita outside work? I should say I'm a self-driven person. I derive a lot of inspiration from the environment and the urge to see that I want things changed. So I'm that person who is driven by my environment to change. I am also, I have a double character. I can be inward, but also very outward. I'm very selective. I grew up in a family mainly with boys. And for that reason, I always fought for space and asserted myself. And probably that's what even makes my work a little bit easier, because I already knew what it means to assert yourself and be independent. I am a mother of boys, to be very precise. Many times people think the drive or the anger I have, probably you come from a girls only family, you only have girls, and I'm just telling you that that's not true. I grew up with boys. I have boys in the house. I'm basically the only girl, apart from maybe other people who stay with us. I'm also a very determined person. When I put my mind to something, I'll go for it. It doesn't matter who says what around me. I'm very determined. And in doing that, I'm also careful, because at times determination can mean that you don't care about other people, but I'm very careful whether this drive does not hurt other people. I also consider myself as a very soft-hearted and kind person. Many times people think I am, this, if you meet me for the first time, especially in my work environment, even at home, in my family, but I'm a very soft and kind person. I relate very well with people. I'm one person who does not draw boundaries. We grew up in metropolitan Kampala, so we really did not know who is who. And I don't really care who you are. I'm not segregative at all. And that's why most of my friends, my childhood friends especially, it took me time even to know the regions where they came from, most especially because we all spoke English. So you wouldn't know. And that has really, for me, in a way, I don't see a difference whether somebody's from this region, this country, so long as you're human. I'm that type of person. I'm hardworking. Yeah.
Yeah, I can attest to that, having known you for, so many years. Rita, I think about over 30 years.
Yes.
And, truly you're one of the most kind-hearted and generous people, and very committed. So, and I'm watching what you've done on the space around women's equality and gender equality is truly inspiring. And you've made such a big impact, and we're so happy to have you to share your wisdom today. I want to start with something that, when we're looking at gender equality in the workplace, to start at the legal level around human rights, because the human rights framework sets the framework, the aspirational framework, so to speak, of what should be done, right? What are we aspiring to when we say gender equality in the workplace? And two very important women's human rights frameworks come to mind. The Beijing Platform for Action, which is, in 2025 celebrated 30-year anniversary of the Beijing Platform for Action, a global women's rights framework. And we also have the Maputo Protocol, which was adopted by the African Union in 2005. So last year in 2025, we celebrated 20 years of the Maputo Protocol. And what is aspirational about the Maputo Protocol is that it's one of the most comprehensive legal frameworks around women's rights. And it was developed by African women for African women. And it's a binding legal document that promotes gender equality in different spaces: education, health, and employment, which is the topic of our discussion today. And since, Uganda ratified the Maputo Protocol in 2010, joining a number of countries that have ratified the protocol. So it is binding on Uganda and a number of African countries that have ratified it. But I wanted to ask, what is the significance of these two women's human rights frameworks when it comes to gender equality in the workplace? What would you say is its significance?
Thank you very much. Just as you said, for example, the Maputo Protocol for and by African women basically means that time came when African women had to state what exactly they wanted and not be told what you should have. That is very significant. And the same is for the Beijing. Of course, the Beijing process is really the climax. There were other conferences that happened before Beijing. You have the Vienna, you have Nairobi, you have Beijing, and all these women were speaking in unison on the rights of women. And for the very first time, the 12 critical areas of the Beijing Platform of Action informed, especially in Uganda, it formed and laid the basis for legal and policy reform. Around 1995, when the Beijing conference happened, Uganda was going through the legal reform processes, policy formulation, and really embracing the gender agenda. That was the time we had the Ugandan constitution enacted, we had the subsequent laws reviewed, and a number of laws coming into place: the Local Government Act of 1997, the Land Act of 1997, and all these other subsequent laws that came after. So in a way, these two frameworks, for Uganda in particular, came at the right time. Including the Maputo Protocol. 2010, that was the time we also had our laws here, the ones you mentioned that I actually participated in, the Domestic Violence Act, the Trafficking in Persons Act, all this. So you find that there is a connectivity, and the Uganda is not working alone, but hinging on already established standards, making it easier, going back to your question, making it easier for us to use these both the Maputo Protocol and the Beijing platform to hold our own governments first and foremost accountable, but also hold ourselves in the workplace accountable.
Yeah. For those who may not know what the Maputo Protocol is or what it promotes, what are some of the legal commitments in the protocol that are specifically related to promoting gender equality in the workplace?
Now, I didn't tell you that in the Maputo Protocol, Uganda had some reservations, particularly on bodily integrity, issues of decisions of abortion. But the Maputo Protocol is really about giving women that space to make decisions, whether in leadership, on their bodies, violence against women, and also to ensure that the workplace is safe for women. And that, in a way, helps us, because when you look at the Beijing platform, you talked about CEDAW earlier on. The reason why I'm trying to connect these two not platforms rather, but these two, the Maputo Protocol and then the Beijing Platform for Action, for us to trace history. Because when we just talk about the Maputo Protocol and the Beijing, it's like we started there. There were other conventions that were in place, like the CEDAW convention that was there. So these are all building up onto what was and has already been established. The only difference is these ones are making emphasis on particular areas, and more so for Maputo Protocol focusing on the African continent.
That's very true. The connection or the progression of women's rights at international and regional level is a progress from CEDAW in 79 to the Beijing Platform for Action to Maputo, and it shows the tenacity of the women's movement in Africa and globally to bring I think the slogan at that time was women's rights are human rights, because at that time they were not seen as human rights, but from the CEDAW Convention through to the Maputo Protocol, we see women pushing for their rights to be considered as human rights, and it's a testament to the tenacity of the women's movement across Africa and globally, that these conventions are there and the states have ratified it.
You could even add the UN Resolution 1325. That is very specific on how women and gender issues should be addressed in conflict resolution, in reconstruction processes. Now, all these others are really going into very specific areas. But the real issues started, the struggle. And for me, at an individual level, I always want us to appreciate the struggles of the other women, our great-grandmothers, our grandmothers, and our mothers made before we came to the age that we're talking about now.
Yeah, that's true. I think also what's important for the Maputo Protocol and why it's important to, I think shed a light on it is because it is an African homegrown instrument. A lot of times we in Africa tend to think, especially when it comes to human rights, we tend to think of it as an external, it's coming from the West.
Yeah, the global norm.
But then the Maputo Protocol is homegrown by African women, by African governments, because they ratified it. And so the commitments from the Maputo Protocol are from us. We're saying as African women, this is what is important. And I think when you look at the protocol, it promotes, the fact that, we should eliminate discrimination against women in all forms. And like you said, for example, Uganda has a constitution that promotes elimination of discrimination. The Maputo Protocol also, when you come to gender equality in the workplace, it has provisions around equal pay for equal work, around recognizing women's unpaid care, and that government should I think provide economic value to women's unpaid care work. It protects from harassment, including sexual harassment and work. So there are a lot of provisions in the Maputo Protocol, which is African grown. And so we shouldn't, as African, citizens or employers, think that this is something that is, too, from external. It is something that we can aspire to, and we can actually implement. And I think maybe you can shed light on how, since government ratified it in 2010 and all these other global legal frameworks, what is the achievement that government has had in terms of the legal landscape around promoting gender equality in the workplace? What are some of the provisions that legally government has put in place to embed those commitments into law?
Thank you for first highlighting some of the critical areas, that the Maputo Protocol focuses on, but also just to say that when you look at those areas, issues of equal pay for equal work, issues of unpaid care work, issues of sexual harassment, if you look at them critically, these are issues, particularly and I'm not saying it's only Africans, but we must acknowledge that the situation probably is worse for us. And that's why the African women and the African governments came up with those specific areas, because they had been socialized to be normal issues. A woman can have the same qualification, but because she's a woman, she can get less pay. We have one of our historicals in this country who fought for equal work for equal pay, the late Rita Achiro. When she came back from England as a qualified teacher, she was in one of our schools here. And when she went to teach, despite the fact that she was even more qualified than some of the men, they were proposing to give her less money. Because one, she's a woman. Secondly, she wasn't married. And she said, I'd rather work for free. So she started that struggle at that time. So some of these things that we have socialized to be normal have now been regulated into protocols such as the Maputo Protocol. So to draw our attention as African women and African governments on the African people that these things can be reversed. And we can't blame history for some of the things that happened, but they can be reversed. And that has been the progression. So your question was, what has government done? So that is the reversal part of it. And I must say, in Uganda, we are not short of any laws or policies to address issues of discrimination and gender inequality. Our labor laws are very gender sensitive. Actually, recently it was reviewed again. So even maternity leave increased for women. It used to be only 45 days, now it is 60 days. Paternity leave also increased for men. There's no discrimination in gender pay gap, except that the monitoring, that whether government can monitor other institutions, especially the private sector and even civil society, whether they meet those standards. In government, there's no especially when it's in public service, there is no pay discrimination. If you are position X, it doesn't matter who occupies that position, you get the same pay. So Uganda has gone a long way in terms of putting policies and laws in place to address women's rights and gender equality. The challenge we are struggling with, which is a development challenge, development is progressive. It doesn't happen in a one day, 1 year, or even years. is that while these conventions, protocols, or even the laws are in place and policies, the implementation has not yet yielded the type of results that we should be seeing, especially as a country that has been at the forefront of championing women's rights and gender equality. And that's why organizations like UWONET, where I work, and many others continue to advocate for implementation, for resource allocation, for infrastructure development, to ensure that the gaps that exist can be bridged, for capacity building, awareness and conscientizing people, mindset change, and of course, some of the issues, for example, the issues of abortion rights, you can't talk about it in Uganda because of the mindset change, the mindset. And how do we change that? That a woman's body cannot be tagged to, let's say, a religious belief. And most of the campaigns against that is because the religion says this religion says that, this religious institution. So that has totally derailed women's bodily integrity. It has totally derailed women's body health. And unfortunately, we lose so many women. Uganda is one of those countries where many women die due to birth-related complications. And that's just one of them. The health budget, the Maputo Protocol is very clear. The health budget is still really at its, we are oscillating between 6 and 8% of the, of the total national budget. And yet human capital development is it's not even one, it is the most crucial for development. Unless unless the human beings have the capacity, have the ability to participate, to exercise, to engage in national development issues, then it's going to be very difficult for a country to develop. If we're not healthy, if people have not gone to school, and they don't have the knowledge. Now we're talking of, AI and artificial intelligence and all. If people don't have that capacity, it's going to be difficult. Yeah.
So you're pointing out a very, I think, fundamental, challenge. The fact that, yes, as Uganda, and I think a lot of African countries have made progress in their national legal frameworks and their policy frameworks to implement what, international and regional human rights frameworks like the Maputo Protocol say in terms of gender equality. So we have the legal frameworks. We have, for example, the Employment Act. We have other labor laws that you've mentioned that codify some of these principles: equal pay for equal work, maternity leave, like you've mentioned, protection from sexual harassment. But from what you're saying, there's still a gap between the policy and the implementation. And, to read some of the statistics for our viewers, according to the 2025, according to the 2025 National Priority Gender Equality Indicators for Uganda, which was published by UN Women and the Uganda Bureau of Statistics, women's employment rate in Uganda is 15% lower than men's. And in the formal sectors, women occupy less than 30% of leadership roles. So, for example, board roles or CEO roles or management roles, women occupy less than 30%. Wage gap still persists in Uganda. Women earn 20 to 30% less than men for similar work, even though we have all the laws there. And across Africa, we see occupational segregation, women dominating more in informal sector, which are low-paying work, while men dominate in the formal sector and get more highly paid. So this, reflects what you're saying, Rita, in terms of the disconnect between the legal framework and the practice. So I wanted to ask you, what are some of the factors that you've observed that contribute, for example, when we say the wage gap or the leadership gap in the workplace? What do you think are some of the factors that contribute to these disparities in practice? And how can employers close some of these gaps?
Okay. Some of the drivers of the wage gap and leadership gap goes back to what we started with. That is the belief that women do not deserve or are not entitled, that they are less and they can do with less. You are judged according to your age. There's ageism as well. I gave you the example of the late Rita Achiro, a young woman, well-educated from Oxford. You come back and you are in this male-dominated institution teaching. Despite your qualification, they think, one, you're a woman, so you should get less money. And they then go ahead to tell you you're not yet married. And yet, for probably the counterpart who is a young man who is not married, that question wouldn't rise. So even before we go into the legalities, the implementation and all that, that mindset alone already creates that gap. And you'll find that this is not only institutions that probably do not understand gender or human rights. It cuts across. It cuts across everywhere, Even in higher institutions of learning, in the academia, where you'd expect universities where you have professors, doctors with PhDs to understand these issues because they've gone to school. So it's not about school, it's not about the law, it's not about the policy, it is the mindset. That is one driving factor. Because if that wasn't the case, probably now we have more urbanized people, we have more educated people, we have more educated leaders, but we are still seeing the same things that our grandmothers struggled with. So for me, the negative social norms continue to be a big driving factor in the gaps.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that is one thing that we really constantly need to change. I know as women's rights and feminist organizations, that has been, our motivation to try and change policy, practice, and otherwise. But it's beyond just a small group of women to do that. And it can't be entirely their responsibility. This has to be a national project, so to say. So changing the mindset is crucial. Building from the base, right at the family community level, for us to socialize our boys and girls, men and women, to believe that they're both equal and they should be given the equal opportunities, is a human right. The other driving factor, if you move away from the usual negative social norms, comes to leadership. Leadership sets the standard. How many African countries, how many leaders, including in Uganda, are totally committed to promoting women's rights and gender equality, as they say in the law, in the policy? It's one thing to have a document that clearly stipulates the rights of women. It's another thing altogether for you to see whether this is being actualized. And we do agree change cannot happen overnight. But there has to be measurable actions and commitment towards the attainment of the bigger goal. This starts from the pronouncements, it starts from the actions, it starts from resource allocations, into those areas where we are seeing those gaps. Also, putting in place punitive measures. Are people punished? For example, when you talk about issues of sexual harassment in the workplace, are people punished? Or it is the victim who is victimized instead. You're made to prove beyond reasonable doubt what you are saying, and now you even start questioning yourself. So, and that's where leadership is crucial. Making sure that the leaders at whatever level, whether it is, at the lowest level, the village level, council level, district level, national level, are we really committed to these issues? Or we are glossing over for purposes of reporting, right? You report CEDAW, Uganda has this law in place, Uganda has so many women in this place. Is it for purposes of that, or we can really talk to women in Uganda or even Africa and other countries and the women can say for themselves, yes, not everything might be right, but we are seeing we are in the right direction. So for me, that leadership is the second one.
At Jabali Consulting, we're launching Lead Boldly, a gender transformative CEO toolkit, a practical guide for CEOs, founders, HR leaders, and executive teams in the private sector who want to move beyond policies and actually transform their workplaces. Because gender inequality at work is not just about individuals, it's about systems, power, and everyday leadership decisions. Our Jabali Consulting 5-pillar approach guides you from leadership mindset and power analysis to inclusive leadership, safer culture, and market impact. It's designed to help you strengthen leadership pipelines, improve retention, and boost ESG performance by transforming your systems. If that sounds like your next step, join the waiting list on our website. That is www.jabaliconsulting.com, or click the description link below. Joining the waiting list entitles you to getting early bird discount, receiving exclusive insights, and priority booking on our advisory opportunities. Let's move from intention to real change in our workplaces and businesses.
And then the third is also ensuring that institutions that are outside government abide by government laws. As much as we can say that government is not doing that much, but government also has the responsibility. In the case of employment, government is not the largest employer, no. The majority of the citizens are employed in the private sector. Question then is, are the private sector meeting these standards? And who should be making them abide by the standards? Then it goes back to you who is setting these standards. Are you doing it yourself? So that's another big challenge. And in the private sector, it's business driven. Now in our sector, which is an NGO, is donor driven. Managed by a few board members and a few staff. Internally, there are mechanisms. First, for accountability internally. Secondly, for accountability at the national level. And once that's not there, Christine, it becomes very difficult for us to even talk about progress. And hence, it becomes a driver for the consistent and persistent abuse because nobody's watching. The fourth, I could say, is the lack, not probably lack is too much, the limited knowledge or the consciousness of the citizens. Do they actually know their rights? Do they know their obligations? It's one thing to know your right. It's another thing to know that you have an obligation. And when you know you have an obligation, you take action also. You don't stop at asking for your rights, for people to treat you right. Do you also take action to treat other people right? And do you take action to do what is needed out of a citizen? And therefore, the knowledge, the awareness, the consciousness, or what you'd call citizenship, the quality of citizenship is still wanting. So that also contributes to some of the abuses that we see that persist, whether it is in the pay gap, whether it is in sexual harassment, whether it is in inclusivity in terms of leadership. Because some people, when women get into leadership, they think it's a favor. And once you take something as a favor, you can't question, you can't stand up to speak for yourself. Probably you can't even provide alternatives. You'll always wait to be told what to do. So how do you claim that right, that authority, that you are, equally important to participate in these spaces? So the awareness, the citizenship is still wanting, and hence we see these even just mere reporting as a citizen. If something happens, even if it's not to me, can I take action and say, something is happening to the neighbor or to so and so, and I don't think it's right? That is active citizenship. And being able to question.
Yeah. I like what you've said, that the different challenges that different workplaces are facing to implement these legal provisions. The mindset. What is the mindset that we have as a society when it comes to gender equality, as employers, both in public sector and, like you're saying, in private sector, which employs a lot of Africans, whether in self-employment or in the formal sector. Leadership, very important. Like you've said, what is the leadership commitment when it comes to gender equality in the workplace? It's not enough to have good gender policies or a sexual harassment policy at work, but how do you as a leader ensure that it is enforced? How do you, when there's a report that comes to you, what is your commitment? How do you show your commitment and accountability? And what you've said about us as citizens also knowing our rights, but also being obligated to ensure that our rights are met and to push for those rights to be met. Yes, so Rita, when it comes to power in the workplace, who has power, who does not have power, who wields power? Power is such a big part of the workplace culture, just as it is in society. So I wanted to find out from you if you can give us a sense of what are some of the dominant forms of power relations that you have observed in the workplaces, and how can we shift towards more transformative ways of handling power in the workplace?
Okay, so I had explained, I hope I don't have to go back, where this whole idea of power, sense of entitlement is derived from, and how then we carry that to our workplaces. And going back to your question, in the workspace, who has power, who wields power, and who does not? And what are the dominant kinds of power? One, I told you at the beginning that power, according to our socialization, is masculine. Because in the home setting, whatever men did or the roles that they were given were roles that showed power. And the roles that women were given are roles that are for caring for others. Now, with that mindset, when somebody gets into the workspace, despite even legal provisions and policies in place, that directly or even indirectly emerges the power over decision being made by a particular person or people will definitely emerge. And I want to say that this is not necessarily only for men, because socialization also teaches us that we treat people the way we are told to be treated. We are told how we should treat them. So you find a woman who is in a leadership position will behave like a man, because according to that socialization, power belongs to men, majority. So even the way they handle themselves, there's no feminine leadership. So you find that it is authoritative, it is it's not consultative, it's not inclusive, unless somebody has gone through the transformation of how to manage and handle power. So having said that, I'm just bringing that so that we don't think that, these power issues is only men who abuse it. It can happen either way because of the socialization. And we have seen in certain cases where people even say, oh, the women bosses it's not the woman boss per se, but it is how she was socialized, that how you show power. Unless you show power with authority, people don't think you're powerful. I don't know whether I'm making sense. The way you have to be the decision maker, the dictator. Yeah, when you're soft, you're inclusive. I said, oh, you're being too soft. But in that softness, you can still be a leader. You can still you can still show power. You can still lead. Actually, the word used power is so, I don't like using it. Leadership is better. You can still lead. Yeah. So now, that background manifests itself in a way that most of our leadership in the workspace is the leader of power over. Not power with
the more dominating kind of power. I am over you.
Yes.
I am the Lord.
I am the decision maker. You need to listen to me. You can't do this without consulting me. You can't. Of course, you need to be consulted as a leader, but you need to also give people latitude to make decisions, because nobody is born with leadership skills, but given the environment that nurtures leaders, anybody can be a leader. So that nature of power that is more dominant, authoritative, not questionable, is what we see in most of our workspaces, unfortunately. Now, the challenge with that is that you silence people, you silence voices, you kill emerging leaders, even people who could be leaders. You don't give them that opportunity. And it's even worse where there are cases of sexual harassment. People can't report because of fear, because there's no space to engage. On the other hand, where there's inclusivity, power with, you're consultative, you engage, you delegate, give space, you see a thriving team. And even where there are challenges in such power centers, you find it is easier to address those issues because everybody has opportunity to contribute, has a voice to contribute.
That's so powerful. And I think as people in the workplace, leaders in the workplace, this is a critical area that we need to engage in when we want to be transformative. How do we as leaders engage with power? How do we show up? What kind of power do we use? How do we wield it? Who do we give space to? How do we share power with others? Like you're saying, are we inclusive? Are we embracing? Are we delegating? Are we empowering? And, are we ensuring people also use their power as well, so that we're not all, we don't just promote the dominating type of power that spreads fear. And like you're saying, it then creates a culture of silence. And that's where, violations happen, because then people are not able to be open about what they are facing. So moving away from the challenges, because that is not the only picture we have, I wonder if, our viewers and listeners might be feeling very discouraged about this, saying that, there are so many challenges, many barriers. Are there any examples of, from your observation or from your own organization, where you have seen truly gender inclusive and equitable practices being put into practice? What are some of those you can share with us, so that our listeners and our viewers can say that actually this can be done? When we talk about gender equality in the workplace, there are some good examples. Are there any that you can share with us?
Definitely, there are a number of good practices. We raise these challenges not because there are no good practices, but because they override. And we don't want to forget that we still have work to do in terms of improving the situation. There are a number of good practices, especially engaging with civil society organizations, international and regional organizations, where you see there are deliberate attempts to mitigate the challenges that we've spoken about, whether it is the social challenge, the mindset change, the practice, because the mindset comes with the practice, whether it is a policy issue. You find in a number of workplaces, especially where I have worked, but also where I am currently, the practice of ensuring that women and men have equal access to the privileges, the opportunities that accrue in the organization for staff. Equal opportunities, whether it is a training opportunity, increasing knowledge, going outside, that opportunity is given for all. And when you do that, you see there is that motivation. The other is also ensuring that the policies within the institutions are not just on paper, that they're actually implemented, and the team can see that this is working, so that we do not become the same people who are agitating for improvement on the legal policies at national and international level, and internally we are doing the different thing. That is also working. Issues of maternity leave, flexi working hours. I have seen organizations that have, baby corners for mothers, flexi hours. These are things that our mothers never had. So there is improvement in that area, to understand that our gender roles are different. So if a mother has a sick child, I'm not going to be like somebody working in a business enterprise. You clock in, you clock out. When you don't come, your salary is cut. There are those institutions that still do that. Regardless, you have a sick child as a mother and you call in, you've not come, that is one day a portion of your income cut. That is not happening in institutions like ours, and I want to believe many civil society organizations, because work is not my presence. I've lost time, yes, but the reason for which I've lost time is genuine and it's understandable. How do I catch up with that? That's why we have teams. How do you share that responsibility? That is working perfectly for us. And it motivates staff. You're not going to police people around. The other is also ensuring that we have medical, that women's health is crucial. Access to medication is important, and ensuring everybody has access to medication is important. Equal pay for equal work. There's no discrimination in terms of salaries or even entitlements, whether you're traveling or not. That is something that we also practice. And generally respect for each other, and then confidentiality when somebody has an issue, whistleblowing, reporting, sexual harassment, those are taken seriously, including background checks. I have seen institutions that even when you've done the interview and you're the best candidate, the background checks is rigorous and it determines. Issues of sexual harassment and others are very important. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, very good examples. I wondered if you could also talk to us about your organization is developing, I think, a self-care policy that not many organizations do. If you could talk to us a bit about that, what kind of policy is that? I think not many organizations have it, and it's also a critical area when it comes to gender equality in the workplace.
Yeah. Yes, we are developing a self-care policy, and this comes from the nature of work we do. As NGO workers, development workers, we are driven by results and outcomes. We want change, and also the pressure of the nature of work we do. Because of that, there's a lot of negligence, both by the institution that employs you because you have work to do, but also yourself, because you want to deliver to the best of your ability. And because of that, many times people forget that without me, my contribution cannot be made in UWONET. Without me being healthy, my contribution cannot be met. Without me relating well with my colleagues, all these other things we're talking about cannot be done. So there's need for space for the team to be reflective of their inward and person. So yes, that we did that deliberately. One, we said if we talk about it, it's just a matter of talking, but let's put it into policy. When we said there has to be team building, where we're just going to do team building, nothing else, not talking about work, harvesting outcomes, where we are coming from, what we plan to do, just be yourselves, build the team, have some hours off during the week so that people can catch up with their personal issues. If my person is not organized, I can't be organized at work. And we need to recognize,
if your cup is empty, you can't give back
what you don't have
to others.
Yeah, to those who believe in the Bible, it says you can't give what you don't have. So how do you expect me to come and give you 110%, and yet in my personal space I'm doing at 50%, and nobody cares why I'm doing at 50%, but here you're expecting 110%. So it is a give and take that institutions need to realize that even if it is a factory where you count boxes, I like using that, in factories, your output determines. So they tell you pack 1,000 boxes in a day, then they'll say, oh, you've done well. But even if you're counting boxes, for you to be able to count those boxes, your arm, your mind, everything about you has to be well. And who cares about that?
Yes.
Why should it be only my business to care about that? And that for us at UWONET, it has become very instrumental. I know there are a number of institutions that are also doing that now. Self-care is very important. Working half a day in a week, or even work one day, work at home is important. Because if you don't do that in an NGO, you can end up working 7 days a week, 20 hours a day. And nobody cares until you break.
Yeah.
So for us, we're moving.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yes, we're moving from the rhetoric and putting into policy, and then ensuring practice happens. Yeah.
I like those practical examples of what are organizations actually doing and what is working well. What are some of the good practices? I think those are useful for different workplaces, and sometimes we think that it's only this is only for civil society or private sector, but our law says workplaces is anywhere, and all these practices should be practiced in all types of workplaces, including at home. At home is also considered a workplace. Even in the informal sector, those are also workplaces. So what we're talking about on gender equality in the workplace is relevant for whether you are a workplace of one or a workplace of more than 100 people. What is a gender equality institution in 3 words from your perspective?
Equal opportunities, shared power, and voice, agency.
Fabulous. Rita, thank you so much for our discussion today, for a very inspiring and educational discussion on the landscape of gender equality in the workplace in Uganda and in Africa. We look forward to having you again as a guest on another podcast episode. And to our audience, if you're a policymaker, an employer, an HR leader, activist, or employee, this season is for you on gender equality in the workplace. Let's continue to build workplaces that are inclusive and where everyone can thrive. You can listen to this and past episodes of the Ubuntu Narratives podcast on the Jabali Consulting website at jabaliconsulting.com/podcast or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening to the Ubuntu Narratives podcast by Jabali Consulting. Until next time.